All right, so this is what I've been telling you. This is something like how knowledge itself is generated. First of all, there's the unknown as such, and that's really what you don't know anything about. And generally, when you encounter that, you don't encounter it with thought. You encounter it like this, right? And that's the first representation of the absolutely unknown. It's something that is beyond your comprehension, and it's terrifying. And because it's beyond your comprehension, you cannot perceive it, you cannot understand it, but you still have to deal with it. And the way you deal with it is that you freeze. That's what a basilisk does, say, to the kids in Harry Potter, right? They take a look at it and they freeze. And that's the snake, the terrible snake of chaos that lives underneath everything. You see that thing freezes you. And that's because you're a prey animal. But at the same time, it makes you curious. And so that's the first level of contact with the absolute unknown, is the emotional combination of freezing and curiosity. And that's reflected, I think, in the dragon stories. The dragon is the terrible thing that lives underground that hoards gold or hoards virgins. Very, very strange behavior for a reptile, as we pointed out before. But the idea is that it's a symbolic representation of the predatory quality of the unknown combined with the capacity of the unknown to generate nothing but novel information. And it's a very, you can see that as very characteristic of human beings, because we are prey animals. But we're also unbelievably exploratory, and we're pretty damn good predators. And we occupy this weird cognitive niche. And so one of the things we've learned is that if we forthrightly confront the unknown, terrifying as it is, there's a massive prize to be gained continually. And so that seems to be true, right? As true as anything is. And then I would also say that that idea, now we know that one of the metaphors that underlies God's extraction of habitable order out of chaos at the beginning of time is an older idea, and a more archaic idea, that God confronted something like the Leviathan. That's one of the words for this serpent-like chaos creature that's often used in the Old Testament, or there's the Leviathan and the Behemoth. Yeah, that's the other thing. And so there's this idea that I think probably came from the Mesopotamians, that God, either in the son-like aspect or in the father-like aspect, is the thing that confronts this terrible beast that represents the chaotic unknown and cuts it into pieces, and then sometimes gives the body parts to the populace in order to feed them. So you can see a hunting metaphor there as well, but it's deeper than that. And so, all right, so the first thing is that there's the absolute unknown, and the unknown is what you do not understand. It's what's beyond the campfire. Maybe it's what's beyond the tree, even more anciently, you know, when we lived in trees. It's out there where you don't know. And what's out there? Crocodiles and snakes and birds of prey and cats and all sorts of things, like predatory cats, and they will eat you. But there's utility in going out there to find out what's there. Like maybe you go and you don't kill the snake, you kill the damn nest of snakes. And that makes you pretty popular, just as you should be. And that accelerates your reproductive potential, let's say. And we're descended from people who did that. And so we have this notion about how the world is structured that's deeply embedded in our psyche. Like really, really deeply, way, way down, way below the surface cognition. Way down in the limbic system, in these ancient parts of the brain that are like 60 million years old or 100 million years old or older than that. Ancient, ancient brain structures. And so the first thing we do is we act out our encounter with the unknown world. And we act that out in the same way, in a manner that's analogous to the manner that's presented as a description of what it is that God does at the beginning of time to extract habitable order out of chaos. And I won't tell you about the other part of that for now. So you act it out first. And then the second thing is you watch people who act it out and you start to make representations of that. That's stories, right? And maybe you admire them. And then after a long time, you collect a bunch of those stories, and then you can say what that is. You can articulate it as a pattern. And this is something Nietzsche also figured out to begin with, you know, because prior to Nietzsche, I would say, he did so many things first. It was quite remarkable. You know, there was an idea that you first think and then you act. And people like to think that, but of course you know it's complete bloody rubbish, because you're as impulsive as you can possibly imagine. You're always doing things before you think, and sometimes that's a really good idea. So the idea that you see things and then think and then act, it's like, yeah, really? No, I'm sorry. I don't do that. No one I know does that, and they certainly don't do that when they're emotional. You know, you act first. And one of the things that Nietzsche said very clearly was that our ideas emerged out of the ground of our action over thousands and thousands of years. And then when philosophers were putting forward those ideas, what they were doing wasn't generating creative ideas. They were just telling the story of humanity. And it's already there. It's already in us. It's already in our patterns of behavior. And it strikes me that that's, well, he was a genius, and that was one of his many, many observations of pure genius. And so you can think about it, you can think about it like this too, is that there's the unknown, and then you act in the face of the unknown, and then you dream about the action. I mean, that's what you're doing in a movie theater. And then you speak about it. And so, and of course, once you speak about it, that affects how you dream, and how you dream affects how you act. It's not like all of the causal direction is one way, because it's not. These things loop. But it's still from the unknown through the body, through the imagination, into articulation. That's the primary mode of the generation of wisdom, let's say. And you can easily map that onto an evolutionary explanation, because the body comes first, right? And then the imagination, which is the body in abstraction, and only then the word. And of course, that's exactly how things did evolve, because we could imagine things long before we could speak. At least that's the theory. So, and I represented it. This is an image from my book, Maps of Meaning. And so the idea is that this is the fundamental representation of the unknown as such. It's half spirit, because it partakes of the air like a bird, and it's half matter because it's on the ground like a snake. And that's what you think is there when you don't know what is there. That's how your body reacts to what's there when you don't know what is there. You know that too, because if you're alone at night, and maybe you're a little rattled up for one reason or another, maybe you watched a horror movie and, there's some weird noise in the other room, it's dark, and you could just try this once. It's like, so you're on edge, you think, you want to turn the light on and go in the room and see. Don't do that. Just open the door a little bit and sneak your hand in. And just watch what your imagination fills that room with, right? And then you remember what it's like to be 3 years old in bed and afraid of the dark, right? And I read a good book on dragons recently, that had a very interesting hypothesis about them, I thought. One of the things the guy did was track, I can't remember his name, unfortunately, track how common the image of the dragon was worldwide. It's unbelievably widespread. It's crazily widespread. And he thought that this was actually the category of primate predator. And the predator was, so predator is a weird category, right? Because like there's crocodiles in it and there's lions, and they don't have much in common except they eat you. So it's a functional category. And so this is the imagistic representation of the functional category of predator. And his predator theory was, well, if you're a monkey, then a bird would pick you off, like an eagle. And so that's this, right? And then if it wasn't an eagle, it was a cat, because they climb trees and give you good chomping. And then if it wasn't a cat, then you go down on the ground and a snake would get you, or maybe a snake would climb up the tree, because snakes like to do that, and get you. And so that's a tree cat snake, basically. Tree cat snake bird. And that's the thing you really want to avoid. You don't want to come across one of those. And then, the other thing it does is breathe fire, which is quite interesting, because obviously fire was both greatest friend and greatest enemy of humanity. And we've mastered fire for a long time. It might be as long as 2 or 3 million years. That's what Richard Wrangham, I think it's Wrangham, he wrote a book recently on, I think it was Wrangham, who wrote a book on when human beings learned to cook. That was about 2 million years ago. And cooking increased the availability of calories. You know how chimpanzees are sort of shaped like a big, like they're ugly. They're shaped like a big bowling ball, They look really fat, and they're short and they're wide, and that's because they have intestinal tracts that are like, 300 miles long. And the reason for that is because they have to digest leaves. And so you go out in the forest and sit there and eat leaves for a whole day and see how that works out for you, They have no calories in them. So chimps spend about, I think it's 8 hours a day chewing. And it's because what they eat has no nutritional value, and then they have to have this tremendous gut in order to extract anything at all out of it. And human beings at some point just thought, oh, to hell with that, we'll cook something. And then we traded our gut for brain. which, more or less has worked, and I think it's made us a lot more attractive as well. So the idea here was that, well, that's the basic archetype of the unknown as such. And then I like the St. George version of this. It's so cool because St. George lives in a castle, and the castle is partly falling down, and it's partly because there's a dragon that's come up to, like it's an eternal dragon, it's come back to give everyone a rough time, which always happens, because the eternal dragon is always giving our fallen down castles a rough time, always. And so then St. George is the hero who goes out to confront the dragon, and he frees the virgin from its grasp. And I would say that's a pretty straightforward story about the sexual attractiveness of the masculine spirit that's willing to forthrightly encounter the unknown. It looks just straight, looks like a straight biological representation to me. And it's a really, really old story, right? It's the oldest written story we have, and that's basically the Mesopotamian creation myth, the Enuma Elish, which basically lays out precisely that story. And it's replayed. I mean, I bet you the moviegoers among you, especially the ones that are more attracted to the superhero, the really flashy sort of superhero type movies, you've probably seen the St. George story like 150 times in the last 10 years. You never get tired of it because it's the central story of mankind. So you've got the unknown as such, and that is what you react to with your body in the existential terror and extraordinary curiosity are gripping you. And then it's like the unknown unknowns that, who's the politician under Bush? Rumsfeld. Yeah, I think the reason that phrase caught on so well is because he nailed an archetype. There's unknown unknowns and there's known unknowns. And that's the unknown unknown. And you have to be able to react to an unknown unknown because they can get you. And you can't just plead ignorance because then you're dead. That doesn't work. Like, human beings are the sort of creature who has to know what to do when they don't know what to do. And that's very paradoxical. And what we do is we prepare to do everything. That's right. We're on guard. We prepare to do everything. Very, very stressful, but also very engaging and very, very much something that heightens consciousness. And maybe those circuits are permanently turned on in human beings because we also know that we're going to die. And no other animal knows that. And so sometimes I think that our stress circuits are just on all the time. And that's part of what accounts for our heightened consciousness. So you have your unknown unknowns, and then you have your you have the unknowns that you actually encounter in the world, like the mystery of your romantic partner when you have a fight with them. It's like, well, we're having a fight. So who the hell are you? I mean, you're not the absolute unknown because I know something about you, but you're the unknown as it's manifesting itself to me right now, right? And then there's the known that we inhabit, and then there's the knower. And the known is given symbolic representation, as far as I've been able to tell, in patriarchal form, in the form of male deities. And the unknown, as you encountered, is given feminine form. So we won't get into that too much, but if you're interested in that, you could look at my Maps of Meanings lectures, or maybe take a look at the book. But I think it's a good schema for religious archetypes. I've worked on it a long time. It seems to fit the Jungian criteria quite nicely. It maps nicely onto Joseph Campbell's ideas. He got almost all his ideas from Jung, however. And it also makes sense from a biological and an evolutionary perspective, as far as I can tell. And that's a lot of cross-validation.